She said my mommy was too black to stand in your wedding pictures. The words were barely louder than a breath. But they hit Daniel Whitmore harder than any shout inside that crowded Atlanta church. He was standing at the altar in a tailored black tuxedo, one hand resting over his heart, waiting to marry the woman everyone called perfect. Crystal chandeliers glowed above him. White roses covered every aisle. 200 guests sat dressed in silk, pearls, and expensive smiles. And beside the first pew, a little black girl in a wrinkled yellow dress looked up at him with tears shaking on her lashes. Her name was Lily. She was only 7 years old. And the sentence she whispered made a millionaire cancel his wedding before the bride ever reached the altar. Daniel looked down at her. "What did you say?" Lily's small fingers tightened around the stem of a white rose. She glanced toward the back of the church, where the music had just begun to swell. Then she whispered again. "She said my mommy would ruin the pictures, because she's too dark." Daniel felt the air leave his chest. For a second, the whole church blurred. The organ. The flowers. The guests turning to see why he had stepped away from the altar. His mother, seated in the front row, frowned in confusion. His business partners leaned toward each other. The pastor waited with his Bible open. At the end of the aisle, the double doors were still closed. Behind them stood Victoria Lane, Daniel's bride-to-be. Beautiful. Educated. Elegant. A woman from one of the richest families in Savannah. A woman Daniel had believed was kind. A woman who had spent the last year telling him she loved his heart more than his money. Daniel bent down so his eyes were level with Lily's. "Where is your mother?" Lily swallowed hard. "She's outside. Crying by the kitchen door." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why?" Lily's lips trembled. "Because Miss Victoria told her to leave before the cameras came." The church music kept playing, but Daniel no longer heard it. Only one memory filled his mind. A hospital room. A stormy night. A woman named Grace Carter holding his hand while doctors ran down a hallway. Grace was Lily's mother. And 6 years earlier, Grace had saved Daniel's life. Back then, Daniel was not the polished millionaire people saw on magazine covers. He was a young man driving too fast through a rainstorm outside Birmingham, angry after a fight with his father, distracted by pride and pain. His car had skidded across the highway, rolled twice, and crashed into a ditch. The world had gone dark. When Daniel opened his eyes, smoke was filling the car. His leg was pinned. His phone was broken. Gasoline was leaking. And a woman's voice cut through the rain. "Stay with me. Do you hear me? Don't you close your eyes." That woman was Grace. She had been driving home after a double shift at a nursing home. She was tired, underpaid, and still wearing her scrubs. But she had stopped. She had climbed into the ditch. She had burned her arms pulling Daniel through shattered glass. And when the car exploded minutes later, she was the one who had dragged him far enough away to live. Daniel never forgot her face. The calm strength in her eyes. The blood on her sleeve. The way she kept saying, "Your life is not finished yet." After that night, Daniel paid off Grace's medical bills. He tried to give her money, a house, anything she would accept. Grace refused almost all of it. She accepted only one thing. A college fund for her newborn daughter, Lily. "I didn't save you so you could owe me," Grace had told him. "I saved you because somebody should." Years passed. Daniel built a chain of medical technology companies and became one of the youngest black millionaires in Georgia. Grace stayed humble, working as a home health nurse, raising Lily alone in a small apartment near Decatur. Daniel never saw Grace as charity. He saw her as family. So when he and Victoria planned their wedding, Daniel insisted Grace and Lily be included. "Grace is the reason I'm alive," he told Victoria. "She sits with my family." Victoria smiled that day. "Of course," she said softly. "Anyone important to you is important to me." Daniel had believed her. Now, in the church, with Lily shaking in front of him, that belief cracked like thin glass. The doors at the back opened. Every guest turned. Victoria appeared in a designer wedding gown that sparkled under the lights. Her father walked beside her with proud, careful steps. The string quartet began. Phones lifted. Cameras flashed. Victoria smiled at Daniel from the end of the aisle. But Daniel did not smile back. He took Lily's hand. And instead of facing his bride, he walked down the steps of the altar. A murmur passed through the church. Victoria's smile flickered. Daniel's mother whispered, "Daniel?" But he kept walking. Lily's small shoes clicked beside him on the marble floor. Victoria stopped halfway down the aisle. Her smile tightened. "Daniel?" she said, still trying to sound sweet. "What are you doing?" Daniel looked at her. "Where is Grace?" The guests went silent. Victoria blinked. "What?" "Grace Carter," Daniel said. "Where is she?" A tiny shadow crossed Victoria's face, but she covered it quickly. "Oh, sweetheart, she wasn't feeling well." She stepped out. "We can talk about it after the ceremony." Lily hid slightly behind Daniel's leg. Daniel's voice dropped. "Did you tell her she would ruin the wedding photos?" Victoria's father stiffened. A few guests gasped. Victoria's cheeks flushed pink. "Daniel, this is not the time." It became the time when a 7-year-old had to tell me the truth. Victoria looked around at the guests, embarrassed now, not sorry. She lowered her voice. "Please don't do this in front of everyone." Daniel took one step closer. "Did you say it?" Victoria's eyes hardened for half a second. Then the mask returned. "I was trying to avoid drama," she said. "Your guest was being difficult." She showed up in a plain blue dress, no makeup, and the photographers were already stressed. "My mother thought." "I didn't ask what your mother thought." Victoria swallowed. Daniel's voice cut through the church. "I asked if you told the woman who saved my life that she was too black to stand in my wedding pictures." No one moved. Even the music had stopped. Victoria's lips parted, but no answer came. And in that silence, everyone heard enough. Daniel turned toward one of the ushers. "Find Grace. Please." The young man ran toward the side hallway. Victoria's father stepped forward, his face red. "Daniel, weddings are stressful. My daughter may have chosen the wrong words, but you are embarrassing both families." Daniel looked at him calmly. "No, sir. Your daughter embarrassed herself before God and a child." Victoria's mother rose from her seat. "Are you really going to let a little girl ruin your wedding?" Daniel looked at Lily. She was crying silently now. He squeezed her hand. "No," he said. "She saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." A wave of whispers moved through the room. Victoria's face went pale. "Daniel, you can't be serious." But he was. And everyone could see it. Then the side door opened. Grace Carter stepped into the church. Her eyes were red. Her blue dress was simple but clean, the kind of dress a working mother buys carefully and wears proudly. Her hand shook as she held a small purse against her chest. A white rose petal was stuck to the bottom of her shoe. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Daniel released Lily's hand and walked to her. For a moment, Grace could not meet his eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to cause trouble." Daniel stopped in front of her. His voice broke. "You didn't cause trouble. You told the truth by raising a child brave enough to speak." Grace wiped her cheek quickly. "I told Lily not to say anything. She said what I needed to hear." Victoria rushed forward, her veil shaking. "Grace, please. Tell him this is a misunderstanding." Grace looked at Victoria. There was no anger in her face. Only exhaustion. Only dignity. You told me the family photos were for close relatives only, Grace said quietly. Then you said Daniel had worked too hard to have certain images circulating online. When I asked what that meant, your mother said people judge a brand by who stands beside it. Victoria's mother snapped, that is not how I said it. Grace turned to her. No, ma'am. What you said was worse. The church erupted in stunned whispers. Daniel's hands curled into fists, but his voice stayed controlled. What exactly did she say? Grace hesitated. She looked at Lily. Daniel understood. He turned to one of the bridesmaids. Take Lily to my mother for a moment. His mother stood immediately, tears already on her face. Come here, baby. Lily ran into her arms. Only then did Grace speak. She said people would ask questions if a woman like me was standing next to you in the family photographs. Then Victoria said she didn't want the wedding to become some sad story about poverty, race, and charity. The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel stared at Victoria. Victoria's eyes filled with tears now, but they were not the same kind of tears Grace had shed outside the kitchen door. They were trapped tears. Exposed tears. I was overwhelmed, Victoria said. I wanted everything to be perfect. Daniel's laugh was quiet and painful. Perfect? He looked around the church. The roses. The chandeliers. The custom monogram on the aisle runner. The guests waiting for a show. Then he looked back at Grace. The only perfect thing in this building was the woman you tried to hide. Victoria flinched. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. The vows he had written. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he tore them in half. A loud gasp rippled through the pews. Victoria stepped back like she had been struck. Daniel. He turned to the pastor. Pastor James, I can't marry her. The pastor closed his Bible slowly. Daniel faced the guests. I apologize to everyone who came here today. I know many of you traveled far. I know this is shocking. But I will not begin a marriage by betraying the woman who gave me a second chance at life. Victoria's father grabbed her arm. This is absurd. You'll regret humiliating us. Daniel looked at him. No. I would have regretted becoming family with people who think kindness needs to match the color scheme. Some guests looked down, ashamed. Others nodded quietly. But the biggest shock came from the back of the church. One of Daniel's board members, an older white man named Richard Coleman, stood up. He had been invited because his firm planned to invest millions into Daniel's company after the wedding. His voice carried across the room. Daniel, before you walk away, think carefully. Public scandal affects business. Daniel looked at him. Richard, if my business depends on me ignoring racism at my own wedding, then I built the wrong business. Richard's face tightened. That's emotional thinking. No, Daniel said. That's moral thinking. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Daniel's mother stood with Lily in her arms. I raised my son to know the difference. One clap echoed from somewhere near the middle pew. Then another. Then a third. Soon, half the church was standing. Not cheering like it was entertainment. Standing like something painful had finally been named. Victoria turned in a circle, watching her perfect day collapse. Her bridesmaids avoided her eyes. Her mother sat frozen. Her father pulled out his phone, probably already calling lawyers, publicists, or anyone who could fix what could not be fixed. But Daniel was done being managed. He walked to Grace and offered his arm. Will you sit with my family? Grace shook her head. Daniel, I can't. This is your day. Daniel smiled sadly. No. Today became something else. Lily ran back to her mother and wrapped both arms around her waist. Grace bent down and kissed her forehead. I told you not to speak, baby. Lily looked up at her. But he needed to know. Grace closed her eyes, and a tear fell. Daniel crouched in front of Lily. You were very brave. Lily whispered, Are you mad? Daniel shook his head. No. You protected me. Lily looked toward Victoria. Is she still going to be your wife? Daniel looked at the torn vows in his hand. No, sweetheart. Lily nodded, as if this answer made sense in a way adults had complicated. Good, she said. Because people who make moms cry shouldn't get flowers. A soft, broken laugh moved through the church. Even Daniel smiled. But the story did not end in that church. Because by sunset, clips of the cancelled wedding had spread across Atlanta. Someone had recorded Daniel's words. By morning, the video was everywhere. Millionaire cancels wedding after little girl reveals racist insult. News vans parked outside the church. Reporters called Daniel's office. Victoria's family released a statement calling the situation a private misunderstanding. But Grace refused interviews. She did not want fame. She wanted peace. Daniel understood. So when reporters asked him what happened, he said only one thing. A child told the truth. I listened. A week later, Daniel invited Grace and Lily to his office downtown. It was on the 27th floor of a glass tower overlooking Peachtree Street. Lily pressed her face to the window. Mommy, the cars look like toys. Grace smiled, but she was nervous. Daniel, I hope this isn't about money. I told you years ago. I remember, Daniel said. And I'm not trying to repay you. He placed a folder on the table. Grace did not touch it. What is this? Daniel sat across from her. When I built Whitmore Health Systems, I promised myself we would do more than sell technology to hospitals. We would serve people who get ignored. Grace listened carefully. I'm opening a community care foundation, Daniel continued. Mobile clinics. Home care support. Scholarships for nurses from low-income communities. Legal help for patients who get mistreated. I want you to run it. Grace stared at him. What? You know what people need because you've spent your life serving them. Grace shook her head. I'm not qualified to run a foundation. Daniel smiled. You pulled a dying man from a burning car with no cameras watching. You raised Lily alone while caring for strangers. You have more qualifications than half the executives I know. Grace looked down at the folder. Her hands trembled. I don't have a degree in management. We'll get you a team. Training. Support. Whatever you need. Grace's eyes filled. Why me? Daniel leaned forward. Because the world is full of people who know how to look important. I need someone who knows how to be important. For the first time, Grace opened the folder. Inside was an offer letter. A salary. Benefits. A director title. And a handwritten note at the bottom. Your life changed mine. Now let's change more. Grace covered her mouth. Lily climbed into the chair beside her and looked at the paper upside down. Mommy, does this mean you get your own office? Grace laughed through tears. I think so. Lily turned to Daniel. Can it have yellow curtains? Daniel nodded seriously. Only if you approve them. 3 months later, the first Whitmore Carter Community Clinic opened in a small town outside Montgomery, Alabama. Not in a rich neighborhood. Not beside a luxury hospital. But in a former grocery store where elderly patients, single mothers, veterans, and children could finally receive care without feeling invisible. Grace cut the ribbon wearing a navy dress and a name badge that read Director Grace Carter. Daniel stood beside her, not above her. Lily held the giant scissors with both hands and grinned. Reporters came again. This time, Grace spoke. Her voice shook at first, but then grew steady. "I used to think dignity was something people could take from you," she said. "But I've learned they can only reveal whether they had any of their own." Daniel looked at her with quiet pride. In the crowd, an old man in a veteran's cap wiped his eyes. A mother held her baby closer. A teenage girl in scrubs whispered, "I want to be like her." That same afternoon, Daniel received an email from Victoria. It was not long. She wrote that she had lost friends, contracts, and the life she expected. She said she was ashamed. She said she had started counseling. She said she understood now that her idea of perfection had been cruel. At the end, she wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know I finally heard what that little girl said." Daniel read the email twice. Then he closed his laptop. He did not reply. Not because he hated her, but because some apologies do not need an audience. They need a changed life. 1 year later, Lily stood on a school stage in Atlanta for a children's speech contest. Grace sat in the front row, holding Daniel's mother's hand. Daniel stood quietly at the back, trying not to distract her. Lily wore a yellow dress again. This one was new, pressed, and bright like morning. The microphone was too tall, so the teacher lowered it. Lily looked out at the crowd. For a moment, she seemed nervous. Then she saw her mother. Then Daniel. And she smiled. "My speech is called The Day I Whispered," she began. The audience laughed gently. Lily continued. "Sometimes grown-ups tell kids to be quiet because they think we don't understand. But sometimes kids understand the part grown-ups are trying not to see." Grace pressed a tissue to her mouth. Lily looked down at her paper. "I learned that telling the truth can be scary. Your voice can shake. Your hands can feel cold. But if something is wrong, being quiet can make it bigger." Daniel lowered his head. He remembered the church. The rose in Lily's hand. The sentence that saved him. Lily looked back up. "My mom says kindness is what you do when nobody powerful is watching. Mr. Daniel says power is what you use when everybody is watching. I think both are true." The crowd went silent in the best way. The way people go silent when a child says something wiser than the room expected. Lily finished with one last line. "You should never make someone feel small just because they don't look like your idea of important." For a second, nobody moved. Then the entire auditorium stood. Grace cried openly now. Daniel clapped with tears in his eyes. And Lily, the little girl who had once whispered in fear, stood under the stage lights and smiled like someone who had finally learned her voice belonged in every room. Years from now, people would still talk about the millionaire who canceled his wedding. They would talk about the bride who lost everything because she forgot the value of one human heart. They would talk about Grace Carter, the nurse who saved a life on the side of a dark highway and later helped save thousands more. But Daniel always told the story differently. He said the real hero was not the millionaire. Not the church. Not the scandal. The real hero was a 7-year-old girl holding a white rose, brave enough to tell one sentence when every adult in the room was dressed too nicely to speak the truth. Because sometimes justice does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it walks in wearing a yellow dress. Sometimes it has tears in its eyes. And sometimes, it only takes one whisper to stop a life from becoming a lie.